Oh boy, I can't believe it. We're going to orbit. We're going to orbit in the summer or maybe the fall. Yeah, or sometime this year. Yeah, sometime this year. That's what I told them all, and it's gonna happen. We're gonna make it happen. I'm tired of all this waiting. We're definitely gonna... Elon? What did you go and tell those people? Oh shit, hi Gwen. Nothing. Oh, good, because I heard that in the next 7 months, you're gonna finish the Superheavy, something that we haven't even done a hop with, by the way, cram 24, 28 engines or whatever the hell onto it, put the Starship on top of it, and then load it up with 3,000 tons worth of fuel and hit the switch. Is that what you said, Elon? Hey, Gwen, how'd you put those glasses on so quick? No way did I say that. I did say that. A bit. But I did give us until the end of the year. Really? Okay, let's set the Wayback Machine to 2019 and look at that again, all right?
So, this thing is going to take off, fly to 65,000 feet, about 20 kilometers, and come back and land in about 1 to 2 months.
Oh, that just makes me crack up every time I see it. All right, so how many months did it actually take? 6 months? Elon? 18 months. Right. So, now I'm gonna go and tell everybody that this is the worst case of Elon time in human history, and you're gonna go back to play with your rockets, all right? But Gwen, Elon, she never lets me have any fun. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Angry Astronaut. So I hope once again that you guys enjoy my humor. To be perfectly clear, and I of course kind of put this in captions at the beginning, I do not believe that Elon Musk is a raving lunatic that needs to be kept in check by Gwen Shotwell. I believe that he's borderline something. I'm not a psychiatrist who needs to be kept in check by Gwen Shotwell. However, he is an engineering and financial genius, and I do feel very confident that his dreams involved with the Starship, with going to Mars, all of these things are going to happen. I believe in his long-term objectives. And, you know something? People always accuse me that wearing these things makes it to where people don't take me seriously, that they think I'm nuts. It's funny how sunglasses can really change people's perspectives. But for this episode, I'm going to indulge you. I'm going to look you straight in the eye, and I'm going to tell you that there is no way in hell that Starship is going to go to orbit this summer, and it's not going to go in the fall either. It's not going to go anytime this year. This is the most extreme example of Elon time ever. And I'm not basing this off of some wild hunch or my own personal opinions or anything like that. I'm basing this on facts. The amount of time that SpaceX has taken to go from the first iteration of Starship that Elon was standing in front of, as you saw in the video, and talking about going to orbit in 2020, which was not a rational goal at all, as we have seen. And now we're expecting, right after SN15 manages to, carry out a successful landing, however on fire, and we don't know how close it was to exploding, but based on what happened to SN10, it was probably, toying with that possibility before the fire suppression system put it out. Thank God. I'm very happy about all that, and I do believe that Starship will eventually be successful. But to expect that everything is going to happen, all of the boxes that need to be checked in order to get Starship into suborbital flight at least, because that's all this is. It's not going to achieve orbital velocities. It's going to achieve suborbital velocities, go out of the atmosphere, and then come back in without completing an entire orbit. Still an amazing accomplishment, but it's not technically orbit. Still, regardless, I don't care. I mean, if it accomplishes this is an amazing thing. It won't happen this year. There are too many things that need to be done, not least of which is the Superheavy, which is going to be a monumental engineering and construction task unto itself. An incredible task, and it simply isn't going to happen in 7 months. And on top of that, Starship is going to require a complete and viable heat shield. So many things that need to be undertaken in order to make all of this happen. But instead of just giving you a quick summary of all the things that need to be done, I am going to give you a comprehensive review of the Starship, of the details of its operation, and everything that's going to need to be done in order for this ship to leave our atmosphere and re-enter and stand a snowball's chance in hell of surviving that re-entry, and explain to you why it is not rational to think that this is going to happen in 7 months. Now, I do believe that Elon is setting this time frame in order to get his people moving as quickly as possible, to set goals that are incredibly aggressive so that, they do get this launched in 2022. I think that that's his long-term goal. Why do I think that? Because I don't think Elon is crazy, and trying to get the Starship to orbit or, suborbital flight in 7 months is crazy. And I am going to explain to you why that's the case right now. Okay, I know this video is outdated from a visual perspective, but still the principle is the same. The Starship that we've been watching for all of this time is incapable of reaching orbit on its own, unless it was completely stripped down, and even then, I don't think it could actually make orbit with only 6 Raptor engines. The Superheavy is the only thing capable of carrying something as giant as the Starship into orbit, or even into suborbital flight, as is being planned right now. 28 Raptor engines. The total height of this beast is 120 meters, or more than twice the height of SN15. Total thrust at takeoff is 16 million pounds of thrust, or 72 meganewtons. That is the equivalent almost of 2 Saturn V's. And also 2 SLS rockets, by the way. This thing has absolutely no precedent in human history. Now, as we return to the Starship's current appearance, let's have a look at the FAA application. It calls for the Superheavy to detach after a burn time of 169 seconds, given that each Raptor runs through 650 kilograms worth of fuel per second, times 169 seconds, times 28 engines, and you're looking at slightly over 3,000 tons of fuel. Now, it's entirely possible that they're going to use somewhat less in terms of number of engines in order to assure that the Starship is just going to reach suborbital space, but still it seems to me that they're gonna fill it up all the way in order to test pressure, in order to test its ability to fly under the conditions that it's supposed to fly. So in my opinion, it's gonna be fully fueled with its maximum capacity of 3,400 tons. Now don't forget, after burning that 3,000 or so tons worth of fuel to get the Starship into space, the Superheavy still needs sufficient fuel in order to land. Now, under the current plan, they're not going to land the Starship, they're going to just let the Superheavy splash down in the ocean this time, but still it will need fuel to decelerate. Now, if you're of the school of thought that the Superheavy is going to be easy compared to Starship because it doesn't have to do belly flips or anything like that, I'm sorry, but you're very much mistaken. This thing is 70 meters tall, 20 meters higher than Starship. It carries 3,400 tons worth of fuel as opposed to 1,200 for Starship, but here's the kicker. 28 engines instead of the 3 that we've been seeing so far, and we've seen how many times they have to swap out Raptor engines before a launch. Making 28 engines or even 20 engines fire simultaneously is going to be incredibly hard. Plus, look at this thing. It's almost as tall as the Falcon Heavy by itself, and it has triple the thrust of the Falcon Heavy. It is a beast. And on top of that, it needs to carry not 100 tons of Starship and 100 tons of cargo, but also the 1,200 tons of fuel that Starship carries. It has to not only produce an incredible amount of thrust from a crazy amount of engines, but carry 1,200 tons out of the atmosphere. That is not easy, guys. And I know this seems like a million years ago, but we have already seen the extreme difficulty of controlling the pressure of 1,200 tons worth of fuel with the amount of stainless steel that SpaceX currently uses. 3,400 tons worth of pressure is going to be, well, triple the difficulty, at least. And then on top of that, you have to put 1,400 tons worth of weight on top of the thing and still have it hold together and still be light enough in order to fly all the way to space. That is a massive engineering challenge, and I'm not even talking about all the Raptor engines. Think about this for a moment. The total number of Raptors on the Superheavy, at least the 28 that are currently planned, are more engines, twice as many engines actually, as SN9 through SN15 combined. Now, I am all in favor of a little bit of healthy optimism, but it is a colossal leap to go from this 3 Raptor engines generating roughly 1.4 million pounds worth of thrust to this 16 million pounds of thrust being generated by 28 engines. And granted, if they scale back the number of engines, it'll make it easier, but not a whole lot easier. It's just a huge difference, 10 times the thrust, and therefore 10 times the difficulty, and probably even more than that. And I'm sorry to keep bringing this up, but the last rocket to be rushed to launch by a country that was eager to beat the United States was the Soviet N-1, at least with this many heavy-duty engines. And most of us know what the result was. The explosion shattered windows as far away as 35 kilometers. The shockwave was nothing less than cataclysmic, and I would remind you that South Padre Island is only 10 kilometers away from the launch site. We simply cannot take these kinds of risks. And for those of you who say that the FAA would never permit something like this, the FAA doesn't know anything about the N-1 consequences, at least not in detail, because the Soviets kept such a tight wrap on the whole thing. There is no precedent that the FAA can look to for the Starship. As a matter of fact, the Starship has way more fuel than the N-1 ever did. Now, it is possible that SpaceX might try to cheat with this first orbital launch. They might launch a Starship that only has fuel left in the header tanks for a landing. If they did that, the Starship would of course be way lighter and therefore much easier to get into suborbital flight. The difference, of course, would be that it wouldn't be a real test. It wouldn't be a real simulation. As I say, it would be kind of cheating, and I I can't see Elon doing that, but he might for the first launch in order to technically get the Starship into space. However, a Starship without 1,200 tons of fuel is not the Starship. Also, according to the application, Starship will not shut its main engines down until 521 seconds after liftoff, so clearly Starship is going to be carrying at least some fuel, probably all of it. It will, however, only complete less than one full orbit before re-entering and landing in the Pacific Ocean 100 kilometers northwest of the Hawaiian island of Kauai, about an hour and a half after liftoff. The application also says that it will perform a, quote, powered targeted landing, but a soft ocean landing. On top of that, Elon also says, quote, we need to make sure the ship won't break up on re-entry, hence deorbit over Pacific, unquote. Very safe for people on the ground, at least post-launch, but what about the re-entry is going to be problematic? Well, actually, quite a bit, at least so far. The landing itself is not going to be too much of a challenge because, as I already said, it's just going to hit the ocean. They're going to try to do that as vertically as possible, but at least they don't have to hit some kind of platform as illustrated here. However, the big unknown right now is the heat shield, and with the SN-15, there's clearly some issues that need to be resolved. Here's a photo of the heat tiles pre-launch. In the upper right, of course, you can see that there are some tiles that have been affected by something, perhaps the static fire, but still, for the most part, the heat shield looks like it's in very good shape. And then post-launch, it's just much, much different. Many of the tiles look like they've become partially disconnected on their mounts, and then there's one tile that is gone completely. And then finally, there are these particular tiles that are really messed up. Now, perhaps this was a different mounting system that has now been proven to be ineffective, but there are cracks and missing tiles everywhere. There are things that still need to be resolved with this heat shield if Starship is going to re-enter and even attempt a landing, as opposed to burning up and hitting the ocean with a bunch of stainless steel rain. And if the heat tiles are this problematic after just a 10,000 meter flight, what's it gonna be like when it's coming into the atmosphere at thousands of kilometers per hour, subjected to the inferno of re-entry? It's just gonna be completely night and day. The heat shield needs to go through a lot more development before a re-entry is gonna work. Now look, I get it. We are never going to reach this point, reach Mars, unless SpaceX has a very aggressive timetable and a very aggressive test schedule. I completely understand and I completely support this. However, a disastrous test failure, especially on the launch pad, could slow this process down to a crawl. If we want to reach Mars, in my lifetime anyway, and Elon is only a few years younger than I am, then we need to proceed with prudence along with speed. I think that Elon realizes this, and that is why I believe with every fiber of my being that we are not going to reach space with Starship this year. That being said, I also believe that Elon is going to push himself, his engineering team, and his construction crews as fast as humanly possible to get this thing to space, and that reaching Mars by the end of this decade is a very possible scenario because of Elon and because of SpaceX. 10 years ago, I wouldn't think this even remotely possible, and now, because of SpaceX and because of Elon Musk's dream that he is so aggressively trying to reach, it is within our grasp. The next few years are going to be very exciting as long as SpaceX proceeds with as much caution as it does with a fast pace. Now look, I want to make one thing perfectly clear, as I always say in my closing remarks. I believe in what Elon Musk is trying to achieve. I want Starship to succeed. I want the human race to not only reach Mars, but colonize Mars. I want all of these things to happen, and that's why I believe that 7 months is an entirely too dangerous timeline. If anything serious happens, such as what I described in the video, if we have a repeat of the N1 disaster, that is going to create just an unacceptable amount of damage on South Padre Island, and quite possibly a lot of injuries and or deaths. And that would be horribly tragic and would stop SpaceX in its tracks for a very long time and delay Elon's dream by, an amount of time that, he may not live to see his dream realized if something like that were to happen. I think he knows this. And so that's why I do not think that he is going to try to get the Starship into space in 7 months or anywhere less than that. Certainly not this summer. It's just not going to happen. I'm not basing this on my vast knowledge of rocket science. I'm basing this on what SpaceX has been able to achieve in the last year and a half. With the talent that they have right now, they have gotten the top third of the Starship setup, the orbiter basically, to 10,000 meters, and then bring it back down and land it and have it survive the landing. That's what they've done in a year and a half. To think that they can build the Superheavy pretty much from nothing but plans and a brief mock-up and do everything they need to do to that thing, stack the two vessels together and get the whole shooting match up to space in 7 months is not rational. It's just not going to happen. Or if they try to make it happen, it is going to be extremely unsafe. I'm not going to keep harping on about N1, but if a repeat of N1 takes place, there's going to be tons of shattered windows and injuries in South Padre Island, perhaps deaths. We just don't need that. The future of SpaceX and Elon's dream doesn't need something like that happening. And so that's why I believe that it's not going to happen. He's setting aggressive goals for his people so they push towards it and achieve things as quickly as possible, which may be next year. By the way, my promise stands. If Starship reaches orbit and then lands successfully, which is not the plan for the first launch, but certainly, for subsequent ones, if it manages to reach orbit and land successfully, go back to the video where I made my promise, by the way, it's exactly what I said, land successfully in one piece and survives, I will eat a portion of a Boeing hat. That's how confident I am that it ain't gonna happen, because I would not enjoy that at all. But we'll see. Like I say, Elon has surprised the world before, but I think this is a rabbit he simply cannot pull out of his hat in 7 months. Just can't be done. But we'll see. Like I say, that's my personal gamble, and I've been wrong about things before. If you like the way I talk about things, if you like me expressing my opinions bluntly, regardless of who I happen to piss off in the process, you know how to support me. It's all in the description. And, a like and subscribe would certainly be helpful too. But any support that I get from you guys is going to go towards me attending the first stacked launch of the Starship, because I'm going to go see this. No would-be space journalist like myself would miss the experience, and I don't care about the risk. I will be there in person and live streaming at the event, even if it does happen this year. I'll be doing it anyway, and we'll see what happens. So until Starship actually does reach space and it does successfully land and get us one step closer to a fully reusable vessel that will allow mankind to colonize the solar system, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.